So the other day, my girlfriend and I were deciding on what to do for the day, and so I said we should do something really romantic. So I suggested we go watch the stars. At 2 p.m. that is. Yeah, horrible judgment on my end. The only thing we were gonna see shining was my massive forehead in the sunlight. Anyway, we're lying there on the grass, soaking in the warm glow of the beautiful sun, when all of a sudden, this massive, and I mean massive, blimp floats past. And like the well-adjusted gentleman I was, I leaned over romantically and shouted, "Babe, it's the Prydwen, the Brotherhood's here." And she looked at me like I had just confessed owning 12 anime body pillows with Strong's face on all of them in my room. And that was when I realized I might be the only person alive who's actually thought about whether that giant steel sky potato could actually fly in real life. So today we're doing the Lord's work, asking the question that absolutely nobody asked. Could the Prydwen from Fallout actually fly in real life? Now, before we even go too far into the video, no, it definitely cannot fly in real life. But it's way more complicated than that, and here's why. Now, the Prydwen in Fallout 4 is meant to be a badass flying base for the Brotherhood of Steel, a towering symbol of their dominance and technological advancements in the wasteland. It's a gigantic airship, bristling with heavy armor, powerful engines, and an entire battalion of Brotherhood soldiers, all floating majestically over Boston like some kind of Led Zeppelin.
Say that again?
I said, like some kind of Led Zeppelin. So what exactly even is this thing? Well, it's a rigid frame dirigible. Alright, let's get sciencey for a second. What the fuck is a dirigible? Because before making this video, I had no fucking idea that word even existed. Think of it like this. It's basically a fancy word for a steerable airship. You know, like a giant balloon with an engine and a steering mechanism. But unlike a hot air balloon that just drifts wherever the wind takes it, a dirigible is designed to be controlled. They use lighter than air gases like hydrogen or helium to get off the ground, and then propellers and rudders to actually go where you want them to go. The most famous ones are probably Zeppelins, which are a type of rigid dirigible, meaning they have a solid internal framework holding their shape, unlike a floppy blimp. So when we talk about the Prydwen being a dirigible, we're talking about a very, very, very ambitious version of one of these. Now, the Prydwen is supposedly powered by a nuclear fusion plant with 4 massive propellers at the stern and additional thrusters on the flight deck for propulsion. Its exterior is heavily armored, designed to take a lot of damage despite not being built for any aerial combat. And inside it has a mobile command center, mechanical workshops, living quarters, and even a hangar bay that can service up to 4 vertebrates at once. It's a true floating city designed to operate as the Brotherhood's central nervous system for their operations. Now, you're probably wondering where this majestic beast even emerged from. The Prydwen reportedly began construction after the Brotherhood of Steel's decisive victory over the Enclave at the Adams Air Force Base back in 2277. And get this, it took 7 whole years to build. Kind of a quick time frame considering its size, to be honest. But this is 2277 we're talking about, so I'll just let this slide. Think about the dedication and sheer human effort in a post-apocalyptic wasteland just to build something that fundamentally defies physics. And who do we thank for this impossibly named airship? None other than Elder Arthur Maxson himself. He called it the Prydwen, pulling the name from historical fiction, specifically Welsh tradition. Prydwen was the name of King Arthur's ship, a legendary vessel that carried him on epic journeys, sometimes even to the Celtic underworld. So Maxson seen himself as a king, destined to liberate his people from the tyranny and oppression of the Enclave. It's a pretty fitting name for a faction that takes itself very seriously. Under the direction of Lancer Captain Kells, the Prydwen embarked on extensive travels along the east coast before its grand deployment to the Commonwealth in 2287. And he did this in a completely badass manner. I mean, this has to be up there in the coolest moments in gaming, right? Its arrival signaled the Brotherhood's full-scale war against the Institute. So this is not just a prop, it's a mobile base of operations carrying the hopes and extreme weight of the Brotherhood. So why would the Brotherhood even attempt to build such a monumentally improbable flying ship in a wasteland that's already short on resources caused by a war because of the lack of resources? Stay with me here. It just boils down to their core ideology, the entire reason for existing. The Brotherhood believes that pre-war technology is incredibly powerful and if left in the wrong hands, leads to catastrophe, like say, the Great War. So their mission is to essentially secure, control, and hoard all advanced technology. Building something like the Prydwen isn't just about tactical advantage, it's a massive flex of the technological might. Before the Prydwen, their influence was more localized. tied to ground bases, which sort of explains why different chapters of the Brotherhood from other games in the franchise were so different from one another. Now, back to our central question. Could the Prydwen actually fly in our world? Let's break down the sheer mass this thing is supposedly lifting. We're talking dozens of fully armored soldiers, engineers, scribes, and high-ranking officers. Each suit of T-60 power armor weighs somewhere between 500 to 700 pounds. That alone is enough to stress a normal cargo aircraft. Then add the vertebrates, not just one or two for show. The hangar bay can service 4 at once, and they're likely more tucked away inside various sections of the ship. Now, each vertebrate weighs around 25,000 and 30,000 pounds, about 12.5 tons. Now, multiply that by 5 or 6, or however many Elder Maxim thought he needed. Oh, and don't forget that at some point, the Prydwen even transported Liberty fucking Prime. Yes, our communist stomping, laser eye shooting robo giant. The literal fucking Iron Giant. Are you kidding me? And just in case the weight wasn't ridiculous enough, all in all, the Prydwen is stated to be 40,000 tons from the game's official lore. When I tried to make sense of this, I turned to Reddit for answers. Mistake number 1. The moment I asked if the Prydwen could fly, people swarmed in, comparing it to Zeppelins and blimps. I had folks saying, well, the Hindenburg flew, didn't it? Yes, Chad, the Hindenburg also exploded on live radio, and there's video evidence out there. I kept getting responses making fun of me and calling me dumb for not knowing what Zeppelins were, but at the end, I would have the last laugh. So anyway, the Hindenburg was 804 feet long and weighed about 200 tons fully loaded. That's 200 times lighter than the Prydwen, and it was made with fabric and aluminum, not armor plating salvaged from pre-war tanks and ships. See, if you look at real-life Zeppelins and then look back at the Prydwen, what's the biggest difference? Zeppelins, my friend, did not have a bunch of metal armor encasing them. They were lightweight. Zeppelins don't carry vertebrates, they don't carry power armor, and they certainly do not carry nuclear reactors. What they do carry is rich Europeans, jazz musicians, and maybe a piano if you're feeling a bit fancy. The Prydwen is not a blimp. I repeat, the Prydwen is not a blimp. It's a flying battlefish. Battlefish? What the fuck? Oh my god. You could say it's the LeBron James of airships, to be honest. And that's assuming helium lift is even viable. Helium is apparently rarer than a kind word from super mutants in the Fallout universe. So the Brotherhood uses helium. To lift 1 ton using helium, you need around 890 cubic meters of helium gas. So to lift 40,000 tons, you need 35.5 million cubic meters of gas. That's roughly the volume of 14,200 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of helium, or at least 2.5 bananas for scale. And that's assuming perfect conditions. No structural weight, no drag, no engines, no armor, no oversized Brotherhood egos. So yeah, you'd need even more to compensate for weather, motion, and thrust. If the Prydwen was truly using helium, there isn't enough helium in the entire Commonwealth to lift up tons of armor plating, a nuclear reactor, 5 vertebrates, and all the knights. Here's why. 1. Helium is extremely rare on Earth. On Earth, helium is created through a radioactive decay process deep underground, where the gas slowly seeps up and gets trapped in natural gas fields, usually in places like Texas, Qatar, or Algeria, not in the radioactive hellhole that is the Commonwealth. 2. The amount the Prydwen would need is absurd. You need 35.57 million cubic meters of helium to lift 40,000 tons. That's more helium than the entirety of planet Earth produces in a whole fucking year. So in real life, helium is so scarce that the world literally had to create a helium reserve to avoid shortages in medicine and tech. 3. No known helium fields in Massachusetts. Pre-war Massachusetts wasn't known for any significant natural gas fields, let alone helium-rich ones. And after the bombs fell, you're more likely to find super mutants or feral ghouls than helium deposits. And 4. Post-apocalyptic infrastructure is garbage. Even if helium somehow existed in the Commonwealth, refining, storing, and transporting millions of cubic meters without it leaking out is a plumber's pipe dream. And then the Brotherhood of Steel isn't exactly running a helium refinery next to the power armor assembly now, are they? The only semi-logical explanation for this colossal amount of helium is A, the Brotherhood of Steel either bought the helium from out west, which would still be wildly difficult, or they're using alternative technology not based on real-world physics. You know, pre-war sci-fi nonsense like ultra-lift helium hybrids and anti-grav assists. There is no way in hell the Commonwealth has enough helium to lift the Prydwen realistically. The Brotherhood might be hoarding power armor and laser rifles, but unless they found a hidden vault full of helium balloons, that blimp is defying science. It's honestly just not happening. And that's what she said. If you explore the Prydwen long enough, you'll come across a few strange things that don't quite add up. First off, there are several large tanks on board that are supposed to be helium containers. You know, the gas that keeps the ship supposedly afloat. It's believable on the surface, but when you consider the sheer amount of helium needed to lift something this size, tens of millions of cubic meters, it starts to feel like set dressing more than anything functional. There's no way that these things are able to store that much amount of gas without exploding like we have to Taco Bell Thursdays. Realistically, the tanks are probably just there to sell the illusion. Tucked away in the lower levels of the ship, there's something even more unsettling. Two synths, a super mutant, and some mole rats, all being experimented on by the Brotherhood. It's never fully explained what the Brotherhood's endgame is with them, but it's clear they're running some kind of biological or technological research on them. You know, for an organization that prides itself on preserving humanity, the fuck? Did my accent just change? For an organization that prides itself on preserving humanity and controlling dangerous technology, it raises more than a few ethical questions. Altogether though, the Prydwen is an impressive sight, but once you really look inside, it's hard not to feel like the whole thing is more of an illusion than engineering. Now let's talk about one thing nobody ever brings up: bathrooms. There is absolutely no bathroom aboard the Prydwen. The thing has living quarters, kitchens, weapon storage, but no toilet? So you're telling me dozens of workers are working 18-hour shifts, eating 200-year-old food, and the game never shows us where they even go? What's the plan here? Pee out the side as designated P corner behind Liberty Prime? I need answers, Todd Howard. This is the real mystery of the Commonwealth. Forget alien sightings, this is the truth. I'm not adding that into the video, what the fuck. Now let's talk engines. The Prydwen is supposedly powered by a nuclear fusion plant, one salvaged from a wrecked aircraft carrier. This upgraded power plant allegedly hits almost 100% efficiency, which sounds great until you remember that fusion technology in real life is still decades away from being commercially viable. We can barely get one working on the ground, let alone inside a flying brick that's hurtling across the post-apocalyptic sky. Even if you could technically generate that amount of power, you'd still have to apply it constantly to 4 massive propellers and thrusters to keep the ship hovering. And that kind of continuous downward thrust would melt the deck. It would incinerate the landing zones, destroy terrain below, and probably knock out every radio station in the Commonwealth. Not exactly stealthy now, other Maxim. Something that often gets overlooked with the Prydwen is just how much coolant it burns through to stay operational. This is a massive airship running on fusion-based technology, with multiple high-output reactors powering everything from propulsion systems to onboard manufacturing equipment. And fusion reactors, especially ones scaled up to keep something like the Prydwen in the air, generate an incredible amount of heat. To keep the ship from overheating, the Brotherhood has to constantly circulate huge amounts of coolant throughout the reactor, through the reactor systems and other critical components. It's not something you see directly in-game, but it's mentioned in terminal logs and dialogue that coolant is a constant concern, meaning that if the cooling systems failed even briefly, the reactors could overheat or shut down entirely, grounding the ship or even worse. So while the Prydwen might look like a symbol of strength and technological superiority, it's actually extremely fragile behind the scenes. A single failure in the cooling system would cripple the whole ship, which really shows just how much effort and how many resources it takes just to keep it in the air, making my point that it wasn't plausible. So unless the Brotherhood of Steel got their hands on alien alloys, or secretly reverse engineered an alien spacecraft, which by the way does exist in Fallout, it's just not happening. Unless of course they're somehow drawing inspiration from those anti-gravity plates you could install on your highwayman in Fallout 2. If the Brotherhood had those, why bother with helium? It makes absolutely no sense. Unless they really enjoyed the smell of stressed helium. I don't think helium has a smell, right? Even Lockheed Martin couldn't build something like this, and they build things that actually fly. Now, speaking of Lockheed Martin, to get a real-world sense of how massive an airborne platform like the Prydwen would have to be, and how difficult that would be to pull off, it helps to look at Lockheed Martin's largest airship concept, the Lockheed Martin LMH-1. This was a hybrid airship design that was being developed for heavy cargo transport, especially in remote areas without roads or runways. The LMH-1 was nowhere near the scale of the Prydwen, but even at its proposed size, it was considered a major engineering challenge. It was designed to carry up to 21 tons of cargo, roughly 42,000 pounds, or roughly the weight of 85 T-51 power armors, or for my scientific viewers, 161,538 bananas. The airship itself would have been around 300 feet long, using a combination of helium lift and thrust-vectoring engines to move and land vertically, kind of like a cross between a blimp and a hovercraft. Here's the important part though. Even with all of Lockheed's resources, the LMH-1 was still limited to relatively light cargo by military standard. It wasn't armed, it wasn't armored, and it wasn't flying around with fusion reactors strapped to its back. The Prydwen, by contrast, is carrying vertebrates, robots, dozens of soldiers in power armor, all in a ship at least double the length and many times the weight of the LMH-1. So when you compare it to the most ambitious real-world designs, the Prydwen isn't futuristic, it's completely beyond the realm of modern physics. It's not the next step forward in airship technology, it's a sci-fi fantasy that would need breakthroughs in materials, energy, and propulsion that we haven't even scratched the surface of yet. And the Prydwen surprisingly isn't even designed for combat. That's right, despite being a flying military base, it has no active weapon systems. The armor is purely defensive, designed to take a serious ass whooping, not give you one. If a major strike hit the Prydwen first, it would go down. If it missed, the Brotherhood would likely pull the whole ship out of the area. Its main strength lies in coordination. It's a nerve center, not a gunship. So final verdict. The Prydwen is amazing in the world of Fallout. It's iconic, intimidating, and we can't lie, cool as hell. But in our world, it defies every known law of physics, engineering, aerodynamics, and, common sense. It's a glorious triumph of fiction over reality. But hey, in a universe where you can punch ghouls with lightning fists, wear jet-powered armor, and convince people that you're a 200-year-old vault dweller with amnesia, I guess a floating fortress isn't the craziest thing, to be honest. And speaking of floating nonsense, keep your eyes peeled for the next video where I answer a far more important question. How the hell do iBots fly? No wings, no jets, just a floating speaker screaming about American propaganda. If you enjoyed this breakdown, absolutely smash that like button, and I mean raw dog it even. Subscribe for more painful science overthinking, and comment below what Fallout technology you want me to run next.